with this presentation, as Volko has asked me, I can contribute a little bit based on the experience that I had the chance to be part of. As Volko mentioned, I'm from Poland, but most of my life I lived in Western Europe, in Belgium and the Netherlands. That's where I studied, that's where I worked. I worked also 3 years in the United States for one of the firms that is on the forefront of the new urbanism, Dwani Plata Zibek. Maybe you've heard about this firm. But many of the ideas that they have put forward had an enormous impact on the discussion of urbanism in the United States, transforming basically the discussion from a suburban model of development to an urban model of development. I will explain a little bit about this. I think it's very helpful to touch a little bit on this because it shows very clearly the basic temptation, I would say, that developers or cities fall back to. It's easier to build suburbanly, so to speak, than to create urban places. It's much more easier. It's much more easier to go the easy way in terms of developing just one function and so forth. It's much more difficult to build places and cities that are integrated. I will show several examples in my talk. Also in my talk, apart from this short introduction, I will show 3 examples of my work in Poland. Poland has been, as you probably know, has gone through an enormous transformation in the last 25 years since the fall of communism. And I have returned to Poland 23 years ago. So I have been lucky basically to a little bit to be part of it and to do some projects mainly in Warsaw, but actually we are active all over Poland. So that's basically the outline of my talk. Just not to show you some pictures, because pictures say much more than 1,000 words. This is a diagram which is part, I would say, of every presentation on the new urbanism, which shows basically the suburban model on the north of this drawing and the urban model on the south of this drawing. Most of the cities and most that Poland has been dealing with in terms of development and redevelopment rather looks than the north part of the drawing, the suburban model. So for us, it was really important to think what are the forces behind this kind of development so we can understand them and go back to an urban model of development. Because the urban model of development is much more resilient, it's much more meaningful, it's much more profitable even. It's much more human-centered. Yeah, you see it very clearly in the pictures. Both pictures I've taken on the north is somewhere in Dallas, in Texas, one of my first workshops that I had the chance to participate in the United States. That was the view from my hotel room. It's just, you know, empty space without any life. This was 30 years ago, this picture that I've taken. And the picture on the right side down is a picture of Seaside. That's one of the prime examples of the new urbanism, where you see a people-centered space. And basically the 2 themes that I'm going to talk about around the urban design is the neighborhood model and the walkability. Because if you have these 2 concepts in your veins, so to speak, as an urbanist, then basically you basically get it done right. And I will show you a little bit about this. 2 more examples of this mindset. Most of the suburban developments look like the development on the left side. It's much more easier to develop a house, a street, and some houses. It's much more difficult to develop a neighborhood like on the right side, where you create places, where you create an architecture that's harmonious, where you create walkable places. It's a completely different mindset. And in terms of profitability, yeah, we needed to learn the language of the developer, so to speak. We needed to prove that it's much more profitable to build places like on the right side than just do suburban housing as a product that you put on the market. Another example is from my university town. I studied in Belgium. This was basically the first project that I worked on with my professor, Marcel Smets, with Manuel Sola Morales from Barcelona, who had the task from the mayor to transform the public space between the train station and the city. And when I was a student, it looked like on the picture on the left. And when I finished my studies, it would look like on the right. And you see a complete different transformation from a car-dependent paradigm planning to a much more urban placemaking paradigm. This project was done 30 years ago, so it doesn't have all the thinking in terms of climate adaptation as we have today, but it shows a clear shift already in thinking where public transport is much more important, where the urban connection is much more important, where you create the places and so forth. And basically this project brought me to the profession that I love so much, which is the urbanism. Another example from the new urbanism, or maybe not more an example, but basically the thinking is that we look at the city as a conglomeration of walkable neighborhoods. And that's the first level, I would say, to think about when you think about integrated urban design. I use these words, integrated urban design, because Falco has, on his first presentations 2 or 3 weeks ago, explained it to you exactly what that means. And I concur exactly with the same definition of how integrated urban design should look like. When we look at the city, we need to understand how basically the neighborhoods work and how the walkability work. And the Americans made a very rational model of a 5-minute walk between the center and the edge of the neighborhood. Within all the functions should be present in terms a whole range of housing uses, whole range of public spaces, transit, access to green, and so forth. And you see it on the drawing on the right side. That's a drawing from Douglas Farr, also a new urbanist, who has put this, wrote a whole book about it, but it's basically the model that the new urbanists are using as an intellectual exercise, but then always adapted to the real situation in every project. I need to continue because I will talk too much. So why is integrated urban design so fundamentally important? Why is it the basis of all the work that we are doing? Because the temptation to do spatial segregation, to segregate the uses in the market forces, it's very, very strong. And if we don't give an answer to it, it is impossible to create meaningful public space or to build meaningful city blocks. It's like the drawing that I saw in the beginning. You know, when you have the suburban model, you have disconnected uses. It's very hard to put them together. You really need to learn again. We need to learn again to put these things together again. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it is the start. It is the contribution, I would say, of urbanism to resilient cities to make that possible. And the second, I would say, that has to do more with the building of community is when you mix uses, you start to give a chance of building relationships, and urbanism is all about building relationships between people, between users, between functions, and so forth and so forth. And so also the I would say the principle of complementarity, where 1 + 1 is not 2, but can be 3 or 4, becomes much more possible. I will show you that with some examples. when we talk about neighborhoods, there is a major problem that it's not, I would say, it remains a task that it's very difficult to pin down in a zoning plan. And it remains a task that it's very difficult to solve at construction document level. It's something in between. And we've noticed, and the new urbanists have noticed that in the United States, that this blank, I would say, square in the middle is something that is up to us, up to you to fill in. Nobody's going to do it for you. When you work for the city, it's basically the city mayor with a vision for the city who needs to develop a vision for the regeneration of the city. If it is a developer, they need to be willing to go a step further to start to build a full city quarter and not a housing estate, for instance. Yeah. So it is an extra effort, which is very difficult to be written down in zoning plans. The zoning plan is just the first layer. And as such, it is a city making challenge. And basically, these are the two people that you need. You need the mayor on your side, and you need the investor on your side to do something like this, which can create a city. I need to catch my thought for a little bit, but I think the next will show it much more clearer. Now, when you think about neighborhoods, you have obviously the objective layers of any site. You have the spatial conditions, you have the site conditions, you have the urban context, you have the city planning context, you have the environmental issues, transport, heritage, ownership, and so forth. These are already a lot of information that needs to be digested and to understand, basically to incorporate in any vision that you develop for any site in the city. And then secondly, you have a little bit more subjective, those layers. These are the layers that are put forth by the city or by developers or by the market or by other urgencies like climate adaptation, where you add another layer to your design brief. And I will show you 4 examples of projects that are very known. Copenhagen in Denmark is very much into climate resiliency, where it adapted an existing neighborhood fully with complete new green-blue infrastructure to be able to adapt to lack of water and surplus of water. I visited that neighborhood. It's really impressive. If you have once the opportunity to visit, you need to see it to believe it. Pictures will not show it, and it actually would require a presentation on its own. In Aspern in Vienna, it's also a city initiative for a new city quarter where affordability of housing was very important. And they developed a method where they have an urban plan, but they make sure that all price ranges of houses, apartments can be fulfilled, so nobody gets excluded. In terms of housing strategy, it's a very good example that really has proven to work. Another example in Sweden, in Malmö, in a whole district where one of the layers, I would say one of the objectives, was to be energy neutral. Also in our times, very difficult challenge to do. If they succeeded to be completely energy self-sufficient, I read about it that they did it, but I put a question mark because I don't really believe if that's possible yet, but it was a real objective. And another project, there's a project in Copenhagen again by Jan Gehl and his office, where they develop an existing post-industrial site to complete mixed-use project, very dense, where the half of the project is housing and half of the project are offices and recreation, education and culture. A very high degree, a very unusual high degree of mixed use, which they managed to design and implement in a mixed use district. So you see 4 different projects, but 4 different, I would say, objectives that have been developed. So the first problem, as I mentioned, is to define what this neighborhood should be. But this is like the design task, and you have a second problem with neighborhoods, because you need to get all the decision makers and stakeholders involved, and that's an enormous challenge. Because I mentioned before, you need the mayor, you need the investor, but then suddenly when you work in a city, you need the neighbors, you need the people who live there, you need the NGOs, you need other institutions, you need city departments, you need experts, and then it all comes together. How do you get those people to work together on a project so they agree on a vision, so that vision can be translated into documents and in procedures that can be approved and built. And now I need to ask Olena if I'm talking too quickly. It's okay? Yes, because you're seeing you do.
Olena always manages. It's crazy, yes. But it's
I see you're working like hell, and I need to make sure that you're doing fine. Thank you, Olena. Thank you very much. So when I said about the first problem, I see it then as an opportunity, the neighborhood design as a city making challenge. That is one part. But then we still have the challenge of a community making challenge around the project. And that's what makes urbanism so fascinating and so rich. And every project makes a completely different experience, because you meet different people, different challenges, and different outcomes, where basically we at Urbanist, we learn at every project. And we basically put our know-how to disposal, but we never impose solutions. The solutions always come out of the process. And that is a much more gratifying, I would say, process than I've seen many grand visions done by architects, but they seldomly succeed. So getting all these decision makers and stakeholders involved, that means you need to define the process of doing so in terms of analyzing the making an actor map. Who is really the decision maker? Who is really a stakeholder? What are the issues of the site? All these layers that I mentioned, get all the information. Start to make first workshops just to get a discussion going. First internally, perhaps with the city council, with the city mayor, and the people of to get really our method would be to say it somehow is to understand where the city stands in their thinking. And then we can show, look, maybe there's a path forward, from the status quo that you have. On the other hand, we need to talk to developers, to investors, to see, okay, what they see as a business opportunity for their site in terms of housing or offices, of shops and so forth, for this location, for that specific location. And then the third still element is, for instance, really difficult issues around heritage or traffic that needs to be solved, which always, the number one question that on every workshop is, okay, but where am I going to park my car, for instance? Yeah. It's a very down to earth, I would say, question. But if you don't solve the traffic, you don't solve the transport, then it's very hard to move forward and people will think about these basic things. So we work on different levels based on, you know, we need to speak in a certain kind of language with the regulators, with the city, a certain kind of knowledge and language. We need to talk with the developers, investors, and still we need to be able to also to be able to talk, you know, to people who will use it. Yeah? Because the people who use it, who live there, actually are the real experts of the site. That's a phrase from that is really much used that we learned in the United States, that it's very hard to come, you know, to people as the experts to say, no, you live here. Tell us what works and what doesn't work. An incredible amount of information come out of these kind of workshops. And we put them around the table, as you can see on this pictures on the left side, and we try to understand what really happens on that site. I will show you 3 examples.
Maciej, can I interrupt for a second because you're
Yes.
I know how many slides you have, so maybe a little
How
bit.
much time do I have? How much time do I have left? It's 6
Until
o'clock.
it's now 6 o'clock in Poland, so try to finish in 25 minutes.
No problem. I will try. First example in Warsaw. Warsaw has been in redevelopment since the last 25 years. And one of the programs that the city has developed was, you know, for post-industrial sites, what can we do there? And we have done 3 or 4 of them with the city. This is one of them. On the other side of the Vistula, the Praga district is called the Szwedzka area, where where the city planned and is now built the new metro line, and this site was in the middle of a new metro stop that called actually an opportunity to define a new city quarter around a new metro station on a site that was largely derelict, largely undeveloped. And part of our job was to bring all the city departments around one table to talk about this, to develop, to invite the neighbors, to invite the investors, and see what can be done on this project. I will not go much in detail because it will take us too long, but it shows you how quickly we could come to a solution that works with defining new urban quarters, new functions, a new school. The red buildings are heritage buildings, for instance, and making it work with the public transport and so forth. And with the city blocks, you also have to define the potentials for public spaces and places, which we illustrate, and make sure that these are understood also by the community. That's why we also develop, you know, hand sketches or like on the left side to convey the ideas which are important to convey. And based on vision that is developed then during the workshops and after the workshop, because the question is, how do we translate this in documents? You prepare a plan where you define the areas with the parameters, which can be then submitted for adoption apart from an official procedure. So that's one example of a post-industrial site, very quickly through that whole process. Another kind of project are public spaces. We've done 5 big public spaces in Warsaw. 2 are already realized, 3 are in the making, designed but are in the procedures. I will show you one, the Upriser Square. It's right in the middle of the city. Where we started, it looked like most of the cities, like I showed you in Leuven. Basically, big parking spot, 5 lanes, no life, no green, or very little green. Very a place that really needed to be thought about again. We had at the workshops 28 NGOs who came at the workshops. 80 people actually representing their point of views. It was really difficult to manage them all, but we managed to understand what the main desires were for this place, to make it really a next public space accessible for the people, where we have an underground parking garage. This underground garage is already built, and this is the situation where the investor left it. And now the city has approved the documents for the everything which comes next to it, and they started construction already, so it will become very close to what we designed in the first place as a new green oasis in the city, in this very urban area of the town. And the third example I want to show, which I want to delve a little bit more deeper, which is in a town south of Warsaw, in Piaseczno. That's the town where I live, actually, where not so long ago, these cities still looked, very dreadly, I would say. There was no life, there was no green, nothing attractive. And one of the big transformations that Poland and Polish cities have gone through in the last 20, 30 years is basically transformation from this kind of state to a state which I will show you in a minute, because most of this rejuvenation has been done already in Piaseczno. But again, you need to get the decision makers on board. You need to get the stakeholders on board. You need to start a discussion to understand what the main issues are. And here, the main issues, for instance, was that within the historic center, the city still had a lot of land which they owned, and they wanted a vision for the land that they owned within the city center, to redevelop it and to make it again a place which has much more energy. A very good technique when you have a lot of people on workshops is to divide them in smaller groups of 8 to 10 people around one table with a moderator, and then very often you can have a situation where at different tables you come up with similar solutions or new ideas, and you can test very quickly with many people actually which ideas are viable and which ideas are less viable. But to show you just an image how it works, or what the potential of the place was, this is just a 3D model, of course, of the existing buildings on a Google picture. But we covered on this land, there's still a lot of possibilities to build within that city center, to make it much more mixed use, to bring back housing into the city center, because very few people lived in the center at the time, to make a new town hall, to make a new culture center, new shops and so forth, new quarter, and with that also to define the new public spaces, or to redefine the public spaces within that town center which were there. Another view from another angle. The white was existing, the yellow was the result of the workshop, and a small perspective where we dig a little bit more deeper into the public spaces to show how these places could live, and just to show how that quickly evolved. 1 year after this general vision, the city announced architectural competition for this new city hall and cultural center, where you see the public spaces have been followed exactly as our drawing that we provided with our vision on the left side. And this is now under consideration to be built. The city is now bringing together the funds to make this happen. And the public space, I showed you the picture in the beginning. This is a completely different and new quality of life. Shops have returned, people have returned, life has returned. So with this, integrated urban design approach, we were able, together with the city and the investor, to regenerate this town. It's all the same principle, basically, that I mentioned from the beginning, but adapted in different contexts. So and then part of this vision, I think there's also something that the last 10 years has become very much to the forefront, is developing, the climate adaptation plan for the cities, to really think through the blue-green infrastructure. We do this with engineers and with people who are really experts in the use of water, how we can capture water and reuse it again and keep the water on the site. Too much water still is immediately captured and then put in drains and put away. It's a very big challenge, a very big discussion the last 5 years to reverse the course, to keep the water where it falls and make it used for the green that you need for the city. Yeah, in terms of the much bigger heat waves and much higher, much longer, drier periods on the one side, and on the other side, when rain falls, the rain falls much more in torrents, so much more water in a shorter time. The city need to basically provide infrastructure to adapt to these kind of changes. So you limit the amount of how do you say that? When you have a lot of water and streets become blank and become, I forgot the word, overstroming, Volko. I forgot the English word.
Flooding.
Flooding, yes, thank you. Which become much more common. And the other side, creating this microclimate which makes cities much more pleasant. So apart from the investment part, also this public space connected with the green blue structure is an integral part of the whole exercise. So returning to the slide, basically explaining the fundamentals, why is it so important? And some keywords, this spatial integration within the neighborhood structure, is necessary for to develop these city blocks which are meaningful, relate to public places, and then you can really advance resilience, as I've shown. And secondly, you need to make sure that you put an emphasis on the walkability of every project, connected to other users, as simply walkable between, people where people live and children go to school. It can come really as simple as that. And make sure that when you make the connections, when you make possibility of complementarity, then actually the building of community is much more easier to achieve. And in the end of my presentation, just for if you want to have more literature, that's a literature that has been part of my, I would say, library for the last 20 years. Some books which are quite easy to obtain. I think Volko, I send you a PDF of the 25 great ideas of the new urbanism. I said a little bit about new urbanism in the beginning. That's a very good introduction, but there's a lot more available. Walkable City is a book by a friend of mine, Jeff Speck, with whom I worked for several years. And he has a very good YouTube TED Talk that has, I think, 1 million views. But it also explains how walkability defines actually the regeneration of city. When you put only that one rule, the walkability, it defines everything else. That's an incredible, strong concept. In terms of valuing sustainable urbanism, on the right, that's an English report by the Prince Charles Foundation. I forgot the exact name of the foundation. who made a comparison between, you know, traditional housing estates and city quarters with the same functions, but designed at neighborhoods. And the value, the commercial value is radically different. And that's the argument for the developers. And some more books, How to Turn a Place Around. That's also one of my favorites, by Project of Public Spaces, PPS. I sent you also a link to a video, I think, by Fred Kent, which explains the idea. And it's basically all the same ideas, actually. They all use the same methods. And once you get into the urbanism, it becomes a virus, I would say. And I think Volker has the same virus and many people around, that you can impact much more people and impact much more than by solely architecture. And that's the difference, that it's very little still actually we are still not enough aware of. Urban Playground is an interesting book because it focuses on children, how to adapt cities to make them child-friendly. And that's an idea that's also shared by Gil Penalosa, who's the mayor of, I believe, in Bogota, who made a principle 8 to 80 cities, meaning that if you design cities which are attractive for children and for seniors, then you will make a city which is fit for all. Tinjil is an Englishman who also an urban designer who demonstrates how you can make urban playgrounds as part of a strategy to regenerate cities. And another one that also put on the list, that's land value capture. That's very much more technical, but I've been I work a lot with investors, and I need to show cities and investors alike how to make money basically on urban projects, and how actually planning tools can be used to I need to find a word, to produce opportunity to collect money from developments that can be used for public spaces, because very often public money for public spaces are lacking in budgets. But also we all know that public space drives actually the value of any investments, good public space. I think I talked 18 minutes since you summoned me, Volko, so I'm 5 minutes before my time. I mentioned many things, but I hope in this 40 minutes I was able to get across some ideas. And thus I thank you very much for your attention. And if you have questions, of course, as much as I am possible, I will try to answer them.
Well, first, have a look at all the things that are entering your screen, because that is a very good sign, I would say.
Oof. Is it like a chat? Then I need to learn how to use it.
There is a chat, and indeed, there's a few people having some questions already, me myself as well. But let's see what is in the chat. So,
You read it, the chat, Volko. You read
I
it.
will do it. Olesya asks, could you please provide a link to a good example of a new blue-green plan? So like an adaptation plan, climate adaptation plan. Or do you have a name of a project, or like I said, a link that
Yes,
we can share?
I would suggest I will write down, and I will provide links to any questions after the talk, because now I don't have them ready. I can only say that adaptation plans in Poland has really taken a takeoff. The Ministry of Environment in Poland is really pushing it, and I can show you. I will forward you a link to the current officer who is publishing a lot about this on LinkedIn. So if you follow him, Paweł Jaworski, you will get automatically many links and many information. He's posting a lot about this. So there's an interesting guy to follow. because he's on top of it, Paweł Jaworski on LinkedIn. Okay, next question.
I'll follow up with the one or two more on the chat, and then we do some live from the people in the audience. Any experience in heritage revitalization in Poland? Good cases from Poland are very interesting for the Western Ukrainian cities as well. So also some links from Hrinishak are asked.
Is that about heritage? Did I
Yes.
understand well?
Yes.
In every city within inner city, we deal with heritage. When we're dealing with the public spaces in Warsaw, also the square that I showed, we had all the heritage institutions on board on the workshop, and it's a very difficult issue to deal. No, I have to correct myself. It's not difficult to deal if you're well prepared. As part of our team, we always have a specialist on heritage who prepares the whole topic of the heritage issues around any site that we work on. So preparation is very much important. And secondly, you need to create from the beginning a direct relationship with the respective officers of the heritage institutions, because they know a lot, they know what they think, and they need to be also included actually in the conceptual phase, so they can understand if we come up with a slightly different proposal than they would imagine from their first, I would say, conservative ideas. So the discussion is very much important. That's a small comment, of course. If I can provide you links to the reports that we did, these are public reports on the city squares in Warsaw. It's in Polish, but maybe with Google it can be translated and you can have an example.
Very nice. Would be very nice. Last one from the chat, and then I go to Solomia and Ina, because I see so many thumbs up for this question by Marina. Excellent lecture. So I'll do that. Very good advice. But very often it happens that parties have direct influence, investors, mayors,
Yes.
pursuing their interests, manipulate and demand obedience to their vision. They use populism to win residents over to their
Yes.
side, and how to act. And do
Yes.
you have experience of that in Poland
Yes.
and the US?
Of course, I've experience, and that's why I would recommend to really read into the charrette methodology. I will also send a link, also in the 25 great ideas. There's also a great whole chapter about the charrette methodology. It's a specific methodology, basically also to manage stakeholders. Maybe two comments about this. First comment is that you need to do very well your homework, meaning you need to be more smart than them on basic issues. So they start to respect you as somebody they can trust. It's basically about trust building, the first phase, but trust building based on merit. So you don't talk based on opinions, but you talk based on findings, on analyses. For instance, you have very concrete ones. Heritage, for instance, is very objective. But traffic can be very objective. Some solutions cannot be solved without enormous infrastructure solutions, which nobody will build for instance. And so one aspect is being prepared in terms of merit on the issues which are important for a given project. So we never go to workshops, I would say, without preparation. We are very, very prepared for any workshop in terms, but also the workshop methodology requires a different lecture or lecture on its own. Maybe Folco, that's an idea, I don't know.
Yeah.
And the second aspect would be I would say the public shaming aspect, meaning if you do public workshops, then people who have bad ideas and you put them out in public, in Poland that has worked, in the United States also, if it's not a good idea, they get, they will be brought down very quickly by the public. Volker is not convinced. Maybe
well, it's an interesting point. I'm interested
maybe
how
Volker you should join.
here.
Maybe you should join my masterclass, and I will.
There is different experiences, of course, in Ukraine, because it also has to do with power and who
yes, of
has
course,
the power on public opinion.
Of course. I don't like power plays, and I do everything. I set up the workshops so power plays get neutralized.
Yeah, exactly.
And also to be sure, before I decide on a workshop, I make sure that I can be able to control them. If I see the politics are too strong, or I cannot, I don't have the means to control the situations, then basically I don't do the workshop. So it's also
interesting.
Yeah.
Connect that to your message of be smarter than them. It's
Yes.
interesting, right? So okay.
You need to, before you get into a public workshop like that, you make sure you can create, I would say, a balance of power.
I expect that there will be more of those questions. I see them also in the chat.
Yeah.
I will answer them also in module 3 when we talk about people specifically, because it's also about stakeholder mapping, about those things. Maybe I'll fly you in for like another 30 minutes, because I think you really touched some nerves here in a very positive way. Let's go to Solomia and try to write the things that are connected to people and about processes and stakeholders and those participation. Write them down, and I will try to bring them to the other module. If it's about general other things, please continue.
Okay, thank you for your lecture. It's really interesting, and I'm not an urban planner, but for me, it every time very interesting when you doing some planning, you make a circle, yeah, and what it will be in the center of the circle? Some transport infrastructure, some social infrastructure, some, I don't know, economical place for work. What in the center when you plan in some areas, new area, what in which sense you are focused on? It's the first question. And the second question, thank you for your recommendation about books. And could you also recommend some very fresh book about urbanism? Because, for example, 25 Ideas, when it was wrote, a lot of things happen and situation very changed. Maybe you can recommend some very fresh urban book. Thank you.
Okay, I need to understand your first question, because are you talking about programming, how we program projects?
I think the question was like this. So in many of the projects in the maps, you see circles, and not everybody understands what the circle is. Is that the plan, or is that because this is the distance?
Oh, there was one diagram where there were circles, right?
What does this circle actually mean when you put it on a map?
Okay, it's very diagrammatic. It shows actually, or the intention is to basically understand the structure of the city. And if you analyze historical cities, if you analyze walking patterns, then you see you can identify centers. You can identify borders, hard borders, rivers, or farmland, or woods, or infrastructure, and so forth. And so within the city, you have areas which have those hard borders, and within those, you have centers. where it's more energy, where it's a church or it's a marketplace, or where you have, you know, some gravitation of energy, so generally speaking. So we try to identify them. And then very often you see that from the centers to the hot edges, it's only 5 minutes walking. It's only 5 minutes walking, very often. And also before the war, you know, the town, I would say the town extensions, they were built by full quarters, integrated quarters with all the uses, not only housing estates, not only shopping centers. And very often they were based on walking distance because people didn't have cars. They were planned to be, you know, close enough so that normal life can happen every day, and so forth. And that's the basic idea, one of the basic ideas of the new urbanism, that we need to get back to a walkable neighborhood. And the size of a neighborhood, you know, is like 400 meters, 500 meters between the center and the edge. It's a very simple diagram that maybe it's just like an idea that with every city looks a little bit different, but the backbone or the pattern, that's why the pattern is very often the same across cultures. That's very interesting as well. That's maybe a response. And about fresh books, I don't know. I stopped buying books in the last 10 years because I don't have place on my shelf anymore. And I'm learning with every project, and I look at books and I come to the conclusion that, you know, there's nothing new on the sun, you know, basically. You have to, some people have really nailed down the basic tenets. So Fulco has a much bigger library than I have, so maybe he has.
I don't know, but it's difficult. It's a good question. These very recent books we manage with the old ones very often, like the between the 60s and 1990s, or maybe a little bit later. A lot of very good books have been written, and still they are needed to be used. So
one example, Christopher Alexander, The Pattern Language, a must-have.
And
It's-
now you could buy this in Ukrainian via Osnowy Publishing.
There you go.
So marketing, good. Let's go to Ina. And we are gonna, Maciej, try to. Sorry, you're too popular, so we have to find a way to
No problem.
to be short. Ina.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for such well-structured lecture, and especially for the case studies and for the practical examples. Just wanted to also share my pain and my question. I'm working for a Spanish NGO, and we focus on capacity building for local and regional governments, sustainable development, citizen participation. So we have been working quite a lot with citizen participation. And currently we are implementing some early recovery projects in Ukraine, and also we address post-disaster recovery after the Dana floods in Valencia. You know, we suffered some very severe floods last year. So now we are trying to dynamize all these spaces to start this post-disaster recovery in Ukraine and also here in Valencia. So what we have been observing from this experience, emergencies are very recent and may reoccur. And Ukraine, for example, it's in the state of constant emergency, unfortunately, because of the war. There is a strong pressure from society to the local and regional governments to rapidly find and implement solutions, and recommendably that they will be visible. The funding mechanisms are not very clear who is going to find it, or they are very fragmented. And the decisions are really made very quickly. And we can see that, for example, there are a lot of overlapping interests, local regional governments, especially in their decentralization form. No, they are very like doing their things. The state has another expectation, businesses, NGOs, academia, citizens. We are all doing something, but we don't know where we are going, and there is no time for in-depth research into, I don't know, kind of sustainable materials that should be used for the reconstruction or nature-based solutions for the climate adaptation, because it's not like in the priority. So given all of these challenges, I would like to ask you, what would you recommend as a good starting point? Probably we need to focus on some specific layers or sectors, implement some intermediate solutions, or develop like some very small actions with visible outcomes, and demonstrate some quick results. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a very complex question, of course. You cannot solve everything, you know. There's a long, I mean, all these projects, these are long-term projects, yeah. And if you deal with recovery, you have basic needs that you need to respond first before you can start developing a vision, you know. And the basic needs, these are basic needs that need to be, you know, responded immediately after floods, catastrophic, you know, IDPs, war, you know, and so forth. To call it back to what I said before, any project, the first thing I try to do, how can I build a platform of understanding first to define the first needs? Okay. For this platform of understanding, to be able to formulate a strategy or with somebody, with some decision makers, you know, then I need to be sure that I have a decision maker on my, you know, that listens to, that who's willing to work with me first. Then you identify the people you want to work with, meaning who have the knowledge that you don't. Yeah, I'm a generalist. I'm not a specialist. I have the best traffic engineer. I have the best heritage specialist. I have, you know, market experts and so forth. I'm not the expert, basically. But if when you have a project, any project, and you are able to define, you know, the basic needs or the issues that need to be discussed, okay, then I need help. I need people who know more about this than I do. So I first reach out to them and see, are you available to think with me about this problem? Are you willing to participate for some time on this platform so we can use your know-how or your knowledge? And maybe I can then create a group of 5 to 10 people and see, okay, what are our objectives for that city, for that project, from the basic ones to the more extensive ones. I followed a little bit what Roskvit is doing 2 years ago, and they do exactly this, you know, for Zaporizhia, for instance, was first getting in contact with people, defining the needs, getting the people involved, talking with the city, and so forth. So I think there is not a short answer to your question. Basically, you know, I hope that with the examples that I've shown, it's I wanted to show it's worthwhile to start talking. Yeah, it's to get a process going, because many people just talk and show opinions, but nobody's doing something. So what you need is a proactive attitude. Actually, you need to do it. Yeah. Otherwise, nobody else will. Will do it for you. I'm sorry. It's a very limited answer, but I
Thank you so much.
I hope it's somehow hopeful. Yeah.
Two more questions from people with hands, and then we're going to wrap up. Although your answers are so nice, but we need to go to the next stage.
Yeah, sure.
Lina.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for your lecture. I was like, one of the problems that municipalities face is that they lack funding for rebuilding, like creating public spaces. And if I understood correctly, you mentioned that you worked with like advocating for for integrated urban planning with real estate. So I'm wondering if you have experience in like promoting this idea with businesses, and which types of businesses are more prone to maybe create partnerships and actually fund, like together with the city, fund such creating of public spaces. Thank you.
Okay. I give you one very clear example, which is now in Warsaw, the big discussion, because there's a new planning law in Warsaw. And the new planning law in Warsaw stipulates that investors can submit a project, a land development project or redevelopment project for a site, but the city has the right to negotiate offsets, negotiate, we will allow you to build, but you need to agree about the vision. And we will negotiate, we'll have an urban contract, that's what it's called. So some money from the investment can be transferred to public space or for school or from other social needs that the city has no budget for. This is new in Poland. Until now, these were like informal talks, but now there's a new law. We formalize this as a tool, basically to help city budgets to prepare plans, but the investor pays for it, to develop the plans. But the city still has the right to negotiate, any infrastructural offsets, to improve intersection, to build a road where it's needed, and so forth. Often related to the project, but now also it can be unrelated to the project. That's I would say the most common example. Yeah.
Yes, very, very interesting. Let's follow Polish processes or Warsaw processes there. And then Denise.
Yeah, my question is, you, someone who also worked in the US, is it a big difference in urban planning between Europe and USA? Because it's as a different culture, and as you know, suburban regions in US, it's a big distance, not as in Europe, it's densely populated and compact.
Yes.
And as big cities, in the center, there are big skyscrapers, and we don't see this in Europe. For me, it's a big difference of type of cities. And is it a big difference of urban planning for you?
Yeah, it is a big difference. I mean, undoubtedly, there's a very big difference, but there's a big but. When you look at the new urbanists, basically they're fascinated by the European cities. Yeah. They're fascinated by compact urbanism. They're fascinated by, what we already have in our cities. And that's one thing. Secondly, because somebody put it on the chat, the City Beautiful movement. We should not forget that America, in the beginning, the first settlers or the first towns, they were very compact. They were very urban, so to speak. They were town founders. Yeah. And that's a big heritage from there that the new urbanism are inspiring from, to inform basically the discussion on how cities should develop. The whole suburban, I would say, phenomenon happened only after the war, Second World War II, when oil was very cheap, land was cheap, and the city were very easy. Cities could extend very far and very easy, and now that model has become completely bankrupt in the United States. So it's not comparable in terms of what happened and so forth, but I can show you slides of how Polish cities have developed outside the historic centers, and very often it looks like suburban America. You see?
Thank you, answer.
And I'm afraid Ukraine's going to be the same thing. And actually, last year I've been in Ukraine for an urban planning project in Zolochiv with the University of Notre Dame, where we helped the city basically to show that a different way to develop the cities than the American way, because all the projects that we've seen in Ukraine from developers, these look like, you know, American suburban sprawl projects, and I'm sure you can concur. So the mindset, you know, and Americans are telling us, you know, don't do like we did, you know, just don't, you know, you have everything. What, you know, you have the best examples, you know, build Lviv, yeah, build Kiev, do you know, adapt to current needs, but, you know, don't do all the mistakes that we have done. So it's an interesting discussion.
Thanks for the question, Denise. Don't do like the Americans did. It's the last words of Maciej, I guess. Thanks a lot, Lilette. I think I'll give it to you. And what I'd like to ask to everybody, I see there's a lot more questions in the chat. Amazing. But also, please answer each other. Not only, yeah, I have this question as well, but maybe I have an answer on a question, because that helps us. We are like one group of big brains. So let's try to support each other here, because we don't have time to answer all the questions now.
Sure. I didn't have enough time to look at the chat, but if there are any questions, you can.
I will forward a few maybe to you, and if you are collecting
forward
some links anyway, then please.
I will prepare some materials. I will discuss, as we discussed. Yeah, so some links and some more reading material, and follow me on LinkedIn. Sometimes I post. So good luck with the workshop.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. This was indeed very, very interesting, insightful, and also touching in a way. So I think you made many happy faces here. So thank you so much. We will let you go now for tonight, but for sure not for forever. So we will knock on your door probably a couple of more times for asking your insights on things. Thank you very much, Olena. Also, thank you again for this incredible work, and yeah, hope to see you soon, both.
Okay. Have a good evening and good luck with everything that you're doing.